Rock and roll legend Jimmy Page is basically a king in the world of guitar. The iconic member of Led Zeppelin, one of the most famous bands in the world, has played his way into the hearts of fans around the world, eliciting reverence and deep respect from fans and fellow musicians alike. However, behind this unparalleled influence on rock music were rumors flying around about the life of the influential guitarist. Watch the video as we look at what Jimmy Page has just revealed, and let's see how it confirms some of what fans might have believed. Jimmy has probably graced every guitar magazine's cover in the world, having been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice. In places like the UK, he was the most wanted guitarist for many years. Despite all these successes, Jimmy protected his privacy and kept his secrets, making him even more mysterious. And like everyone, Jimmy started from somewhere. Jimmy was born James Patrick Page on January 9, 1944, in Hounslow, Middlesex, London. His parents are James Patrick Page and Patricia Elizabeth Gaffin. In 1952, Jimmy's family moved to Feltham and later to Miles Road, Epsom in Surrey. There he went to Epsom County Pound Lane Primary School as an 8-year-old boy, and at 11 he started at Ewell County Secondary School in West Ewell. His dad worked in a company while his mom was employed as a doctor's secretary. When Jimmy was 12, he started playing guitar. He had found a guitar in the house they moved into at the time, and since no one came back to claim the guitar, it was available to Jimmy to play with. He said himself, "I'm not sure if the guitar belonged to the previous residents of the house or if it was left by a family friend. No one could explain why it was there." Jimmy later got some lessons in Kingston but mostly learned on his own, stating, "I didn't have many guitarists around when I was growing up. There was just one guitarist at my school who taught me my first chords, and I continued learning on my own. I got bored so I learned by listening to records. It became a very personal journey for me." That other guitarist was a guy named Rod Wyatt, who was a bit older than him. They, along with another guy, Pete Calvert, would practice at Jimmy's house. Jimmy especially spent many hours practicing and couldn't be separated from his beloved guitar for 1 second, to the point of even taking it to school. There he was allowed to bring it into the school but not into the class, so it was often taken away while Jimmy was in class, but it was returned to him after class. Thanks to the influences of Bert Jansch, John Renbourn, Elmore James, and B.B. King, Jimmy took an interest in folk music and the blues. In 1957, the teenage Jimmy joined a skiffle group, appearing on Hugh Weldon's All Your Own Talent show. They performed on BBC One, playing songs like "Mama Don't Want to Skiffle Anymore" and "In Them Old Cotton Fields Back Home." Jimmy had saved up from doing odd summer jobs and bought himself a Hofner President acoustic guitar, which he played on the show. When asked about his future plans, Jimmy said he wanted to do biological research to find a cure for cancer if it hadn't been discovered by then. Clearly, the young boy had a good heart. He soon decided to leave school at 14 to focus on music. He then joined a band called the Crusaders. He toured with them for nearly 2 years and played on some of Neil Christian's records, like the single "The Road to Love" from November 1962. After getting sick with glandular fever while playing with Neil Christian, Jimmy had to stop touring. While he was getting better, he decided to take a break from music and focus on painting. He went to Sutton Art College in Surrey, and he said, "I was traveling around all the time on a bus. I did that for 2 years after I left school to the point where I was starting to get really good bread, but I was getting ill. So I went back to art college and that was a total change in direction. That's why I say it's possible to do. As dedicated as I was to playing the guitar, I knew doing it that way was doing me in forever. Every 2 months I had glandular fever. So for the next 18 months, I was living on $10 a week and getting my strength up. But I was still playing at college." He sometimes performed at the Marquee with bands like Alexis Corner's Blues Incorporated, Eric Clapton, and Jeff Beck. One night, John Gibb from the Silhouettes noticed him and asked him to help record some singles for EMI, including "The Worrying Kind." After trying out different groups like Carter Lewis and the Southerners, Mike Hurst and the Method, and Mickey Finn and the Blue Men, Jimmy decided to focus on full-time session work. Thankfully, Mike Leander from Decca Records offered him regular studio work. His first session for the label was recording "Diamonds" by Jet Harris and Tony Meehan, which hit #1 on the singles chart in early 1963. As a session guitarist, Jimmy was known as Little Jim P, to avoid confusion with another famous English session guitarist, Big Jim Sullivan. Jimmy was often called in as insurance when the recording artist needed a replacement or second guitarist. Jimmy mentioned that in the beginning, they let him play what he wanted since he couldn't read music at that time. Soon enough, Jimmy became the favorite session guitarist of record producer Shel Talmy. Because of this, he got to play guitar on songs for famous bands like The Who and the Kinks. For the Kinks' first album, he played acoustic 12-string guitar on 2 tracks. He also played rhythm guitar on The Who's first single, I Can't Explain, and lead guitar on another track. In 1965, Jimmy got a job from Stone's manager Andrew Loog Oldham to be the main producer and A&R person for the new Immediate Records label. This allowed him to play on or produce songs by artists like John Mayall, Nico, Chris Farlow, Twice as Much, and Clapton. He also produced Dana Gillespie's single, Thank You Boy, that year. Around this time, Jimmy was linked with American singer Jackie DeShannon. The two teamed up briefly to write songs. Jimmy teamed up with Big Jim Sullivan to work on various albums like John Williams' The Morini Wishful Album, Donovan Leitch's Sunshine Superman, and Engelbert Humperdinck's Release Me. Additionally, Jimmy played guitar on tracks for artists like Johnny Hallyday, Al Stewart, and Joe Cocker. From 1970 onwards, Jimmy played lead guitar on 10 Roy Harper tracks, totaling 81 minutes of music. He also recorded with Keith Richards on guitar and vocals in 1974. They worked on a track called Scarlet with Rick Gretsch on bass and Bruce Rowland on drums. When asked about the songs he played on, especially those where his role is debated, Jimmy often says it's tough to remember exactly what he did because he was involved in so many sessions at that time. In a radio interview, he mentioned that he was really busy, doing 3 sessions a day, 15 sessions a week. He could be playing with a band, working on film music, or participating in a folk session. He had to juggle all these different roles. Jimmy finally stopped doing studio work when Stax Records' influence led to more brass and orchestral arrangements in music, reducing the focus on guitars. He mentioned that his time as a session player was like going to a really good school. He played in numerous sessions daily without knowing beforehand what he would play. Despite some bad sessions, he learned valuable lessons. He decided to quit when he started getting requests for Muzak, finding it too ridiculous. Interestingly, a week after quitting, he joined the Yardbirds. Initially, being a session musician was enjoyable due to the strict studio rules. You had to play flawlessly once the song started. Jimmy was asked to join the Yardbirds in 1964 after Eric Clapton left, but he turned it down to stay loyal to his friend. When Clapton officially left in 1965, Jimmy was offered the spot but recommended Jeff Beck instead. In 1966, Jimmy, Beck, and others recorded Beck's Bolero, sparking the idea of a supergroup. They planned to include John Entwistle and Keith Moon but faced challenges in finding a vocalist and dealing with contracts. It was during this time that Moon first suggested the name Led Zeppelin, inspired by a comment from Entwistle about the project's potential success. Jimmy went to a Yardbirds concert at Oxford shortly before joining the band. He offered to replace Paul Samwell-Smith, who was leaving, and the group accepted. Initially, Jimmy played bass but later switched to twin lead guitar with Beck. Despite their musical potential, conflicts arose due to constant touring and limited success. They released a single together but faced challenges. While Jimmy, Beck, and Clapton were in the Yardbirds, they never played together simultaneously. After Beck left, the Yardbirds continued as a quartet with Jimmy on lead guitar. They released an album called Little Games, which didn't do well commercially, but their live shows became more intense and experimental. These performances laid the groundwork for Led Zeppelin's style. When Keith Relf and Jim McCarty left in 1968, Jimmy had to find replacements because the group had not finished their Scandinavian tour. So he brought in vocalist Robert Plant, drummer John Bonham, and John Paul Jones to form the new Yardbirds, a name inspired by an old joke. Eventually, they became Led Zeppelin thanks to manager Peter Grant's adjustment to avoid mispronunciation. Jimmy had a clear vision for Led Zeppelin right from the start. He gathered ideas from his time with the Yardbirds, where he could improvise a lot during live shows. These experiences helped him create a unique blend of blues, hard rock, and acoustic music with heavy choruses, something never seen before. Led Zeppelin soon became one of the top-selling music groups ever. They sold over 200 to 300 million albums worldwide, with 111.5 million certified units in the US. Their 9 studio albums all hit the top 10 on the Billboard chart, and 6 made it to number 1. The band was known for shaping heavy metal and hard rock with Jimmy's influence as a producer and musician. Their unique style drew from various influences. Led Zeppelin set records on concert tours but also gained a reputation for excess. Despite personal struggles in the late 1970s, they continued to be successful both commercially and critically. During the 1970s to early 1980s, Jimmy was in a relationship with French model Charlotte Martin. They had a daughter named Scarlet Page in 1971, who is now a photographer. Jimmy affectionately called Charlotte "my lady" during their time together. Around that same time, Jimmy was involved in a well-known one-year relationship with a young fan named Lori Maddox, who was also known as Lori Maddox. This started when she was 14 or 15 and Jimmy was 28. Maddox recalls their first meeting as feeling like she was being taken against her will to a room with Jimmy. On the career front, Led Zeppelin held itself together, but in 1980, Bonham's death at Jimmy's house was the straw that broke the camel's back. Bonham passed away on September 25, 1980, at Jimmy's residence in Windsor, Berkshire, after a day of drinking and practicing. As per the coroner's findings, Bonham had consumed a substantial amount of alcohol, the equivalent of 40 shots of vodka that day. Bonham was so heavily intoxicated to the point that he couldn't wake up when his body started expelling the alcohol. Jimmy was so saddened by his friend's death that he couldn't bring himself to play the guitar at first. However, he eventually returned to music but focused on different short-term projects as well as solo work and film soundtracks. Additionally, he got involved in charitable activities. He celebrated his 40th birthday in January 1984, an age he once thought he might not reach. Sources close to Jimmy at the time suggested the possibility of a new band and tour shortly. Jimmy himself reflected on the influence of blues and early rock musicians on his music and saw the potential for new and exciting music to emerge. He then teamed up with Roy Harper for the 1984 record Whatever Happened to Jugula? And played at folk festivals with various aliases like the McGregors and themselves. In the same year, he collaborated with Plant in the Honeydrippers for their album The Honeydrippers, Volume 1 and worked with John Paul Jones on the film soundtrack Scream for Help. Following this, Jimmy joined forces with Paul Rodgers for 2 albums as The Firm. Their first self-titled album in 1985 featured hits like Radioactive and Satisfaction Guaranteed, reaching number 17 on the Billboard Pop Albums chart and earning gold status in the U.S. They released Mean Business in 1986 before disbanding after touring. It was while he was touring with The Firm that Jimmy found love again. He met Patricia, who was a model at the time while she was working as a waitress at a restaurant in New Orleans. At the conclusion of The Firm's 1986 U.S. tour, Patricia went to London with Jimmy. A couple of months later, in December 1986, they got married. They share a son, James Patrick Page, born in April 1988. The couple later split up in 1995 without disclosing the reason. Later on, Jimmy tied the knot with Ximena Gomez Paracha, whom he met in Brazil during the No Quarter tour. Ximena was 23 years old at the time she met Jimmy, and Jimmy was 51 years old. The big age difference between them caused a lot of talk. Even with that, they stayed together for a long time before they also finally split up after 13 years of marriage. Their union produced Sophia Jade and Ashen Josen. Clearly, Jimmy wasn't very good at maintaining relationships at the time. Despite this, Jimmy always stayed positive and continued to succeed in his career. Jimmy engaged in other ventures like session work for Graham Nash, Stephen Stills, and the Rolling Stones. He briefly reunited with his former Yardbirds bandmates for the Box of Frogs album Strange Land in 1986. Jimmy also released a solo album named Outrider in 1988 with contributions from Plant and John Miles on the opening track, Wasting My Time. During those years, Jimmy also got back together with his old Led Zeppelin bandmates for a few live shows. Notably, in 1985 at the Live Aid concert with Phil Collins and Tony Thompson on drums. Jimmy, Plant, Jones, and Jason Bonham, John Bonham's son, played at the Atlantic Records 40th anniversary show in 1988, wrapping up the 12-hour event. In 1990, there was a concert at Nebworth, and Plant was surprised when Jimmy joined him in performing. That same year, Jimmy showed up with Aerosmith at the Monsters of Rock festival. He also jammed with the band's ex-members at Jason Bonham's wedding. Then in 1993, Jimmy teamed up with David Coverdale from Whitesnake for the Coverdale Page album and a quick tour in Japan. By 1994, Jimmy and Plant got back together for a show on MTV's Unplugged series. Their special, called Unleaded, was a hit, drawing MTV's highest ratings ever. After a successful tour in the mid-1990s supporting No Quarter, Jimmy and Plant released the album Walking into Clarksdale in 1998. It included Grammy-winning tracks like Most High and Please Read the Letter. Jimmy worked on improving the Led Zeppelin music collection. He took part in charity events like the one for the Action for Brazil's Children Trust, started by his wife in 1998. That same year, Jimmy played the guitar for Puff Daddy's song, Come With Me, which used Led Zeppelin's Kashmir and was in the Godzilla movie soundtrack. They even performed the song on Saturday Night Live. After a charity show in the summer where the Black Crowes joined him, Jimmy teamed up with the band for 6 concerts in October 1999. They played songs from Led Zeppelin and some old blues and rock tunes. The last 2 shows in Los Angeles were recorded and put out as a live album called Live at the Greek in 2000. After the live album came out, Jimmy and the Black Crowes kept working together and went on a tour with The Who in 2000, but Jimmy left before it finished. In 2001, Jimmy performed with Fred Durst and Wes Scantlin on Thank You at the MTV Europe Video Music Awards. He then reunited with Plant, recording a song for a tribute album and playing at the Montreux Jazz Festival. 4 years later, Jimmy was honored with the Officer of the Order of the British Empire, OBE, for his charity work in Brazil. He became an honorary citizen of Rio de Janeiro and received a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award with Led Zeppelin. In November 2006, Led Zeppelin got into the UK Music Hall of Fame. The event was on TV with famous fans like Roger Taylor, Slash, and many others. In an interview with the BBC about the induction, Jimmy talked about making new music in 2007, saying he had an album idea he wanted to work on. He also hinted at some Zeppelin stuff coming up. In December 2007, the remaining members of Led Zeppelin, along with John Bonham's son Jason Bonham, played a charity concert at the O2 Arena in London. Led Zeppelin set a world record for the highest demand for tickets for one music concert, with a whopping 20 million requests for the reunion show. On June 7, 2008, Jimmy and John Paul Jones joined the Foo Fighters at Wembley Stadium, closing the concert with Rock and Roll and Ramble On. 2 weeks later, Jimmy received an honorary doctorate from the University of Surrey at Guildford Cathedral. During the 2008 Summer Olympics, Jimmy performed with Leona Lewis at the closing ceremony. The United Nations gave Jimmy a special award for peace in 2010. On June 3, 2011, Jimmy performed with Donovan at the Royal Albert Hall in London. Then, 10 days later, he surprised everyone by playing with the Black Crowes at the Shepherd's Bush Empire. That same year, Jimmy also joined Roy Harper for his 70th birthday concert at London's Royal Festival Hall in November. British politician Lise Mensa started a campaign to make Jimmy a knight because of his musical contributions. Then in December 2012, President Obama honored Jimmy, Plant, and Jones at the Kennedy Center. This award was a big deal in the US, as it was for people who had impacted American culture through the arts. In 2013, Jimmy and Led Zeppelin won a Grammy for Best Rock Album for Celebration Day. The following year, he received an honorary doctorate from Berklee College of Music in Boston. However, that year, an NME article mentioned that Plant was a bit disappointed and confused by Jimmy in an ongoing Led Zeppelin disagreement. Jimmy had expressed frustration with Plant for delaying reunion plans. Instead, Plant suggested that they work together acoustically. Then in September of 2014, Jimmy, who hadn't toured solo since 1988, announced plans to form a new band and perform songs from his entire career. He talked about the possibility of hitting the road, mentioning that he hadn't finalized the band lineup but intended to do so soon. Just when one thought Jimmy could not find love anymore, he met Scarlet Sabet. They began dating in 2014 after waiting a while to listen to Scarlet's poetry reading at a London bookshop. The couple has been together ever since. Scarlet is much younger than Jimmy, only 34 years old, and he's 80 now. They've been together since she was 25 and have worked together at Jimmy's London home, Tower House, for almost 9 years. She describes him as a funny family man, very different from what the media shows. In an interview, Scarlet talked about their quiet life together. Jimmy has this bad reputation, and people often talk about his Casanova image. He's not just my partner, he's my best friend who makes me laugh the most. Despite our age gap, it doesn't affect us when we're together. She added, we don't have big gatherings at home. Jimmy's kids and my siblings visit us. We enjoy our time together. I feel safe and inspired in this house. Looks like Jimmy made a relationship work after all. Despite Jimmy's outstanding music career and the legacy he has built for himself, he has also had controversies over the years. The #MeToo movement dug up his questionable relationship with Lori Maddox. She shared that Jimmy was really into her and had someone bring her to his suite at the LA Hyatt House. She described him as looking like a gangster with a hat over his eyes and a cane, which she found impressive. They then had a passionate relationship over the following years. However, at the time, Maddox was only 14 when she met him, and Jimmy was 28. He tried to keep their relationship a secret, even though this kind of situation could get you in trouble back then. Jimmy managed to avoid any legal issues. Eventually, he ended things with Maddox and started dating Bebe Buell, who was of legal age. But that wasn't the only controversy. Jimmy really liked Aleister Crowley, which made people say that he was into devil worship. He even had Crowley saying, "Do what thou wilt," on Led Zeppelin III's vinyl. Although there was no solid evidence that Jimmy was a Satanist, he simply liked Crowley's idea of personal freedom. Jimmy actually bought Crowley's old house in Loch Ness, Scotland, in 1971. He later said it felt haunted but not necessarily because of Crowley. There was also a rumor that Led Zeppelin made a deal with the devil to become famous. In fact, someone claimed that playing Led Zeppelin's famous song, Stairway to Heaven, backwards sounded like a creepy message about Satan. Jimmy didn't deny the rumors, but he said, "I don't want to talk about my beliefs or magic. I'm not here to influence others with what I believe in." Plant was surprised by the whole backward Satanism thing and said, "Who would even think of doing that? You really need a lot of time on your hands to think people would go that far." It can be said without argument that Jimmy has truly gone farther than most in terms of global success. However, it doesn't seem to stop him from wanting to achieve more. Jimmy has talked about possibly releasing more songs from his album with David Coverdale, Coverdale Page. On April 18, 2024, a post on Jimmy's Facebook and Instagram pages discussed the project and hinted at the possibility of releasing additional tracks like Saccharine in an expanded version in the future. It's not clear why he has chosen to talk about making the Coverdale Page album bigger now, a year after it turned 30. Coverdale kept talking about wanting to release a box set of the album in 2018 but seemed to have given up on it. Jimmy's journey from a young, passionate guitarist to a legendary rock icon has been marked by remarkable achievements and personal challenges. Throughout his career, he's not only influenced countless musicians but also shaped the landscape of rock music. He has continually reinvented himself, both musically and personally. Now at 80, he remains a revered figure, still passionate about music and finding happiness in his personal life. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel, The Celebrity X Files, for more documentaries like this. Thank you for watching.